Welcome back to Business, Economy, and Society. That's our course in heterodox economics. This is Module 3 now. And in this module, we're going to look at critiques of neoclassical economics. And those came from two large places. The first is from within academics and the science community. This is called behavioral economics. We're going to look at that first. And after that, we're going to look at critiques that came from the economic world as a result of economic collapse, maybe, and the underperformance of the economy as it was designed in the neoclassical way. So let's start with the first thing, behavioral economics. But before I do that, I would like to go ahead and look at some definitions that we haven't really discussed yet, or that might be a little bit vague at this point. So the first thing, when I say classical economics, when somebody says classical economics, they're talking about that economics from Adam Smith to J.S. Mill, 1776 to the early 20th century, 1920-ish. That's your free market economics. When people talk about classical liberalism, that's more a political term, but that term includes classical economics. It has this classical free market economics, but also includes things like individual rights, freedom, democracy, and limited governments. Classical liberalism is that idea of the European Enlightenment that included free markets, democracy, and ideas like that. So the time frame for classical liberalism is really about the same as the time frame for classical economics. Then you have this term neoclassical economics. This is kind of the rebirth of classical economics. Neoclassical economics, again, it did have that methodological difference that it used marginal analysis, but it also means neoclassical. The prefix neo really literally means new, so new classical economics. It is just sort of a resurgence of that classical economics. Associated with neoclassical economics was this idea called neoliberalism. This is the last idea I've got here on this slide. That, as you might guess, is the political aspects of neoclassical economics. So it takes neoclassical economics as part of it, the main part of it, and it attaches ideas of individual rights and freedom, again, to that. So it's sort of the reassertion of classical liberalism. So really we've got this classical economics being tried twice, and classical liberalism being tried twice in history in these different periods. First period from 1776 to 1920-ish. The second period was from around 1980 to 2008. So hopefully that will make some of the terms I use in this discussion a little bit more clear. Let's talk about neoclassical economics as it emerged. It quickly became an economics of everything. That marginal analysis based on the idea that there's this Homo economicus person that wants to maximize its utility function. Well, economists around 1980, because they became so powerful and because neoclassical economics became so powerful in a lot of facets, economists used it over and over again, and they started to go out into many other aspects of human life beyond the economy. Here's a cover of a book by Gary Becker, who is of the Chicago School of Economics, Nobel Prize-winning economist, where he goes, like many economists who followed him, to talk about economics of, immigration and justice and affirmative action and things that usually economists didn't talk about. So they really started to expand their domain into sociology and into political science. And often the sociologists in political science didn't much like the methodologies they were using, because the economists were convinced that they had solved the problem and made perfect economies in the world starting in 1980s. They thought neoclassical economics and associated neoliberalism, which was enforced globally, was going to be the thing, and it was going to work, and we're just going to settle down into a period in which there's no more history. Again, to quote Francis Fukuyama, there's no more history. We just keep muddling along on this sort of market capitalist neoliberal world. Okay, well, this actually didn't last very long. And the two things that brought it down were the advent of behavioral economics that challenged the orthodoxies from academics, and also the neoliberal economic system. It collapsed, and that was trouble. That happened in 2008. So let's look at the first of those, behavioral economics. It has emerged as a large field within economics, and it's often associated with something called experimental economics, because this is actually economists doing experiments on the behaviors, the economic behaviors of people. They're testing scientifically the assumptions of Homo economicus. It didn't test well for these economists. When economists did, I've published some stuff in this sphere before, and colleagues of mine have, and many economists started to work in behavioral economics, and where they started to test whether this Homo economicus thing existed. And remember, Homo economics is the basis of all neoclassical economics. If that thing doesn't exist, neither does the economic model. Well, Homo economics didn't test very well. It seemed like they didn't exist. Economists realized that, wait a second, humans are not rational. They're not selfish all the time. And they also rely on communication and cooperation. These things are not in the Homo economicus model. So what did that mean for neoclassical economics? The very basis of the entire field was kind of taken out from under them. So, because it's starting from a flawed premise. So let's give you an example of what the implications of behavioral economics might be just in an everyday life. Say you're in business. Say you're in the music business and you just recorded the best song in the whole world. So according to neoclassical theory, you just recorded the best song in the whole world. The market should work well and people would come to find your output, that song, because it's the best song in the world. Clearly, they'll find the best product in the world. That's in the assumption of Homo economics. Economicus, people know what they like, and since your song is the best song in the world, they're really likely to like it. So eventually, they will find you. So according to neoclassical economics, your strategy for business is to put that song on Spotify and iTunes and Amazon Music and wait, because people will find you because your song is good and people are rational. Behavioral economics would say, no. You got to put the stuff on Spotify and iTunes and whatnot, but even if that's the best song in the world, you have to convince people first that other people like it, because it turns out that people are social creatures and they tend to like what other people like. So that's the first thing you have to do. And then you also have to spend a lot on advertising just so people know about your song. You see how behavioral economics invites you to do a lot more work in order to get that product to market successfully. So that's from the sort of ambit of business. And there are a lot of other implications of behavioral economics, though, from how we design our entire economic system to how we do marketing. And here are some things that you'll have to watch to get comfortable with those. Here's a crash course in behavioral economics to give you the understandings. Basically, this guy, then you'll watch something with Samuel Bowles, one of the preeminent behavioral economists and complexity economists in the world. And then a little tutorial on how to properly design a nudge for those of you who are into marketing.